Excellency Jesper Wang, Ambassador of Denmark on behalf of the European Union, Mr. Abdul Wahab Hani, member of the United Nations Committee Against Torture, and to all the participants. You look so tense. Let me ask. Brothers and sisters, frankly speaking, I have no idea how to start the ball rolling. I do not know whether I am the right candidate to officiate this momentous event. Professor Kishore Mahbubani used to share these particular remarks. He told us that the Americans like to begin their speech with jokes. On the contrary, we Asians tend to start with an apology. But today I opt for the American tradition. I would like to break the ice by sharing a humorous story, I suppose. There was a gentleman who was invited to deliver a speech to a particular audience. He started his speech by asking the audience this question: do you know what I'm going to say to you? Naturally, the audience unanimously said, "We do not know, sir." The gentleman then said, "Since you do not know what I'm going to say, there's no point of giving any speech to you." Then he returned home. The following day, he was invited again. He started by saying the same question, but this time, the audience gave a different reply. They said, "We know, sir." The gentleman said, "Since all of you have known what I'm going to say, there's every reason for me not to give a speech to you." Then he returned home again. The audience was overwhelmed. But the organizer and the audience did not give up. They invited him again for the third round. He did not give. The gentleman did not give up either. As usual, he came. He began his speech by asking the same question. Realizing his trick, this time the audience thought they were very smart by giving the mixed answer. Half of the audience said yes, and the other half says no. The gentleman merely smiled and said to them, those who know, please tell those who don't." The audience finally gave up. Actually, I'm tempted to follow the same approach. Despite my worst remarks or my worst introduction, it is a great pleasure for me to be here to officiate the regional dialogue on Malaysia's accession to the United Nations Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment or punishment, or better known by its acronym UNCAT. At the onset, let me congratulate and thank the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, SUHAKAM, for organizing, and the European Union, EU, for funding this initiative. This regional dialogue is indeed a very significant program, and I am exceptionally delighted to be here with you today. I learned that the main objective of this dialogue are, among others, to provide a platform for the exchange of best practices among relevant Asian and OIC countries to learn of the UNCAT's application or state parties, to discuss on contemporary concerns, as well as to promote better understanding of the convention among stakeholders. I am very pleased to know that SUHAKAM has invited Mr. Abdul Wahab Hani, an expert member from the UN Committee Against Torture and board member of the Accession, for the Prevention of Torture, APT, a Geneva-based organization, to become a resource person for a series of programs following this dialogue. This shall be Mr. Hani's third follow-up visit to Malaysia in relation to its accession to the convention, as he has been invited in 2017 and 2018 for a series of dialogues and interagency meetings of the same subject matter. Brothers and sisters, any civilized nation cannot, as a matter of principle, condone any form of torture or any other cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment or punishment. We may then ask how on earth there are still many countries in this world which have been consistently practicing or justifying torture. The basic principle of evidentiary law, that all evidence must be elicited voluntarily, for instance, has been unduly amended or even revoked, thus legitimizing torture. Any genre of torture or other cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment or punishment of any human being is either unlawful or unethical. In fact, in my view, we don't even need any law to outlaw such barbaric treatment or punishment. They are inherently wrong and immoral. In fact, they are evil. They miserably fail to respect this sacred notion that any God's creatures, especially the human beings, ought to be duly ennobled. I like to quote what the Quran says, the Muslim Holy Book. God says, if I may read in Arabic, وَلَقَدْ كَرَمْنَا بَنِي Adam. We have certainly ennobled the children of Adam. When the Muslim second Caliph, Omar, learned that the son of his appointed governor in Egypt had unlawfully beaten an ordinary citizen, he immediately summoned the governor and his son to his court of justice. Having heard both sides, he was convinced that the governor's son was guilty. He then meted out the punishment against the governor's son. He also reprimanded his own governor and in turn proclaimed this cardinal rule of human rights. Once again, I like to quote in Arabic. Ma tastatubun nas waqad walanasum ummahatum ahrara. Since when have you been licensed to enslave or torture anybody when his mother has given birth to him as a free man? If they are in fact inherently unlawful or immoral, why would we still need a specific law to deal with this issue? My answer would be, this is highly unfortunate. Truth be told, some people unfortunately need to be duly educated by a force of law. They have difficulty to comprehend the language of morality. They merely understand the language of penal sanctions. As we are currently living in a global village, it is inevitable for us to have a law which exercises a global jurisdiction against any alleged perpetrator of these heinous crimes. He or she must be subject to global jurisdiction. The arms of international law should be long enough to reach any offender irrespective of his or her stature. The rule of law ought to be upheld, come what may. Brothers and sisters, fortunately, even in the realm of domestic law, we now have a law which possesses this important feature, extraterritorial application. It shows that a state has now realized that a crime can even be committed outside its territorial jurisdiction. As some of you might be familiar, in the international law, there is a legal rule popularly known as jus cogens or preemptory norm. which is derived from the customary international law. This rule is so significant and fundamental in international law, in that it binds all states and it does not permit any exception. It can only be modified by a subsequent form of general international law having the same character. The rule of discordance seems to suggest that the need of any global community to understand this basic notion. There is nobody is above the law. This notion is not a myth, it is real. In my view, the most fascinating of discordance, the more fascinating feature of discordance rule is this. It has this important and required element, i.e., it can be applied retrospectively as duly enshrined in Article 64 of the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, 1966. Be that as it may, this provision may invalidate any existing law, any existing treaty which is in conflict with this very provision. In the case of prosecutor versus Anto Foronzija, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, ICTY, suggested or dictum that the violation of the jus cogens norms, such as the prohibition against torture, had direct legal consequences for the legal character of all official domestic action related to the violations. It held, I quote, "The fact that torture is prohibited by a preemptive norm of international law has effects at the interstate and individual levels. At the interstate level, it serves to internationally delegitimize any legislative, administrative, or judicial act authorizing torture. It would be senseless to argue on the one hand that on account of the jus cogens value of the prohibition against torture, treaties or customary laws providing for torture would be null and void ab initio. And then be unmindful of a state, say, taking national measures authorizing or condoning torture or absolving its perpetrators through an amnesty law. Proceeding could be initiated by potential victims if they had longer standby. Before a competent international or national body with a view to asking it to hold the national measures to be internationally unlawful, or the victim could bring a civil suit for damages in a foreign court, which would therefore be asked entirely to disregard the legal value of the National Authorizing Act. What is even more important is that perpetrators of torture who act upon or benefit from those national measures may nevertheless be held criminally responsible for torture, whether in a foreign state or in their own state under a subsequent regime. Furthermore, at the individual level, that is that of criminal liability, it would seem that one of the consequences of the state, or in other, it would seem that one of the consequences of the liability, it would seem that one of the consequences of the jus cogens character bestowed by the national, international state is entitled to investigate, prosecute, and punish or extradite individuals accused of torture who are present in a territory under its jurisdiction. Indeed, it would be inconsistent on the one hand to prohibit torture to such an extent as to restrict the normally unfettered treaty-making power of sovereign state. On the other hand, bar from prosecuting and punishing those torturers who have engaged in this odious practice abroad. It would seem that other consequences include the fact that torture may not be covered by a statute of limitation and must not be excluded from extradition under any political offence exception. As all of you may be fully aware, that after September 11, the law which duly promoted and safeguarded the human rights have been subject to various threats. The crime of terrorism has been frequently invoked to jettison the principle of human rights, not only from the legal textbooks, but also from the legal statutes. Human rights laws have unfortunately become the sacrificial lambs. Any despotic regimes in this world unjustifiably use or rather misuse the excuse of terrorism in order to flex their muscle by tightening up the draconian laws which have been repugnant to human rights. Ladies and gentlemen, the act of torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment clearly runs counter to the doctrine of human rights. Nevertheless, we need to be honest. There are so many challenges ahead, even in defining any particular act of offence as cruel or human, for instance. I sincerely hope we should never fall into a trap of offering one-size-fits-all formula to every problem. As human rights idea is normally viewed as a Western product, any human rights advocate should be very cautious in simply jumping into a conclusion that a particular punishment or treatment as draconian or repugnant to the human principle of human rights, especially in multicultural or multi-religious society like Malaysia. Like it or not, we have to meticulously consider some Eastern or religious values pervading in our multi-religious country, multi-religious society. Having said that, we are also made aware that there are indeed persisting issues concerning Malaysia's accession to the Convention, which I hope this dialogue may help ease. It calls for a two-pronged effort. As firstly, there is a need for a comprehensive study to be conducted in order to convince all policymakers on the benefit for Malaysia to become a state party to the Convention, as well as to ensure that any proposed changes to our laws or policy are done in accordance with the domestic context, including the social, political, racial and religious norms in Malaysia. Secondly, dialogues of this nature must be strongly encouraged in order to raise awareness among the general public, hence convincing them that instruments such as the UNCAT are essentially to protect their fundamental and basic human rights. Just now I told our chairman, this event may be considered as an elite program. So we have to go down to the people of the street, explaining them in a simple language the importance of having human rights, the importance of ratifying UN any international law which protect the human rights. In Malaysia, in particular, we must approach all the segments of society, particularly the people of the rural areas, because in Malaysia we have so many people who view human rights as a Western product. So we must be very careful, we must be very meticulous in delivering our message to the public, to the people on the street. We recognize that our country is in need of a great